a big part of my role is to make sure that everybody's equipped with the right context so that I'm able to also pass down, like, this is what's going on, at the board, at the exec level, or this is what we're seeing, starting to think from a strategic perspective. So this type of context is like being really thoughtful about consistently passing that to the team so that they're equipped with the right information to make the right decisions when I'm not there.
Hello and welcome to CPO Stories, where I take the opportunity to speak to executive product leaders from some of the UK's biggest well-known companies, as well as some of the stars of the future. On this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Maud Larpent, the Chief Product Officer at Treatwell, the largest hair and beauty booking platform in Europe, which works with over 75,000 salons across 15 countries and processes over 5 million bookings every month. Maud started out working in innovation and strategy for Reuters before a long stay at TripAdvisor, starting out in partnerships before seeing the light, and moving into product there before checking into product leadership roles at Expedia before taking the CPO role at Treatwell, where I'm hoping she gets the lead product with her feet in one of those little tanks with nibbly fish. Maud, thanks for coming and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
I am delighted to have you here and looking forward to digging into some topics that I know very little about. When I get my hair cut, I just go to the guy around the corner and I get whatever haircut the guy that's free at the time can give me. Like I don't have any. This is not my world, so I'm hoping that you're going to open it up for me. But on that, like Treatwell, obviously, I sort of described it a little bit kind of from the website almost, but I'm sure I didn't really do it any justice. So as the kind of person in the hot seat there, like how would you describe Treatwell to someone who hasn't used it before?
Yeah, great. So actually something that really surprised me when I started to dig into Treatwell, when I started talking to some people there, is just how... So I was very familiar with the B2C consumer app. I've been using Treatwell for years to find appointments, the convenience of like being able to book 24/7 and to find new places and not have to call. I'm someone who just likes to do my things on my phone rather than have to talk to people if I can avoid it. I like to talk to my friends, but that's so I knew all of that part, like the consumer part, but what I didn't know is there's a huge SaaS product behind it to power the marketplace. So it's really a SaaS-enabled marketplace, and there's a big B2B team at Treatwell that's building our SaaS Connect and helping salons run their businesses and be successful and manage their time and better fill their calendars efficiently and bring their customers back in, and also solve problems like their fiscal compliance, like all the sexy stuff like that. So all of that piece that you don't see when you're like a customer, but there's a lot of businesses out there that rely on Treatwell to run their businesses day to day, and that's been a big discovery for me and a huge part of the fun that I'm having in the role.
It's interesting that kind of B2B2C motion that you're talking about there, because, I've worked with marketplaces. I've worked with places like Dice in the past, as like Ticket Company, something that itself has a very passionate user base and a very interesting and like well-loved consumer app that you talked about, and probably very similar with Treatwell. But again, exactly as you say, so much in the background that is, focused on, in that case, on things like, venues and, as you say, sort of inventory management and support and operations. And it kind of feels like there's always this kind of unloved part of B2B2C, or the B2B part of B2B2C, which, like, I don't know if it's fair to say, kind of feels very similar across all of the different types of sector that you could do it in, because all types of company need to comply with regulations. They need to, they sort payments out properly. They need to manage stock and inventory and calendars, as you say. So it kind of feels that people sometimes could get attracted to the B2C side because that's what they see from the outside, but maybe have a very different thing when they go inside. So do you feel that you're able to kind of, I guess, almost keep the B2B people feeling part of the cool thing versus that they're just working on yet another inventory management system?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of the main reasons the salons come to Treatwell in the first place, is because they know the brand and they know that we'll be able to help them fill their slots in their calendar. So that's kind of what we're known for to start with. And so it's pretty core to everything we do, and like a big priority and a big topic of conversations with our partners. So it's pretty close to that. But like you said, like every marketplace there's only so much that the consumer facing teams can do without the supply side being able to power it. Like I remember when we were at Verbo, the vacation rental brand of Expedia, or even at TripAdvisor, like you get this great idea of like, wow, we could really help conversion on the consumer side if we could show customers this bit about the supply, like, during COVID, being able to say in this vacation rental, the Wi-Fi speed is this much, like you can work from this vacation rental. We can't make that up as a marketplace, right? We can't plug that number from or that information from thin air. So you have to have that really strong connection between the supply teams and the B2B teams and the consumer teams to be able to make great product happen. Like that's really the magic of the marketplace. It's bringing those two sides together.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting point, and again, something I've seen in the past. This idea that you can still fulfill your consumer promise by making the B2B side as effortless and as featureful as possible, because then it enables you to push those things through to the front, just like you say. So it's definitely interesting. But I think also then and from a marketplace perspective, it's kind of a common thing. You talked about the kind of, you need to build the supply, you need to build the demand, you need to kind of look after both. But I was chatting to someone recently about a recruitment marketplace that they'd worked on, and this idea that they had these kind of principles that I think it was always the employee or the job hunters that were the ones that would get like the focus, whereas like maybe other marketplaces, it would always be the kind of the sell side that would get the focus. Like you enable it through focusing on one or focusing on the other versus trying to make everyone happy at the same time. So in Treatwell, do you have that kind of trade-off discussion where you're like, well, we could do something that would be beneficial to the salons, but we would always prefer to do something for the consumers, or the other way around, or do you try and balance it out so it's kind of even?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, and it's one that we go we sometimes go back, and like over time we've gone back and forth a little bit on like the where do we put first. And I think where it works really well is when you're able to align incentives. I mean, it's easier said than done, but at the end of the day, your marketplace is really healthy and that flywheel is really going if you're able to articulate to your partners why you're doing that thing that will help the customers, which eventually means better outcomes for them. Um, I mean, there's always some cases where it's trickier than that, and you have to pick one or the other. And we tend to pick the customer side where we can, when we're able to see, like, that's a leading indicator, and the lagging positivity is going to be for the partner as well. But it's quite, I mean, the reality is Treatwell has been, going back and forth, mostly like from, we've grown through acquisitions over the years, and there were different cultures. And so some of the companies that have merged were more customer led, and some of the other companies were more partner led. So through the acquisition, it's gone a little bit back and forth. And I think now we're at a point where we're quite balanced actually, and able to really articulate those trade-offs to our partners, and able to really explain to them why we're making some of those decisions. But yeah, it's not always that easy.
Yeah, it sounds easy on paper, right? But how much of your edge then? Because like with any marketplace, it's obviously you've got all of the things that you can build in the marketplace and the functions and the features that you can create, and obviously the availability, etc. But at the same time, you're kind of reliant on there being supply, obviously, and demand, but you're reliant on things to be available through the marketplace. And one way to do that, for example, might be, I don't know, have exclusivity with some of the salons so that they only use you. Is it that, is that the way that you've gone with regards to, for example, yeah, you can only get these salons if you come through us? Or is there this kind of arms race where you and your competitors are trying to, make sure that you get the most out of particular salons?
Yeah, we're not, I mean, we'd prefer to be a one-stop shop for our salons, obviously. But we also recognize that a lot of salons have, you know, fairly sophisticated or like segment-specific needs that we may not be serving yet. And so we keep an open approach that we're okay. We call it dual managing. Like we're okay if some salons choose to do that. We have the hope that we will demonstrate the value over time, that we will make our SaaS better, that will solve more and more of their problems, and eventually they'll choose us exclusively. But we know that we have to prove ourselves first and show the value, and over time win their hearts and minds and their wallet, I guess. But in the short term, we're also being pragmatic and realistic about it, and we'd rather be able to have the salon that we can, have more completeness of offering for the consumer side, because that also is important for us in the short and long term. And then over time, the salons we think will build more of that stickiness over time.
But one thing then that also then starts to kind of crop up a lot these days, obviously, as you know, is this kind of idea of AI and like what you can do to differentiate using things like AI to help deliver a superior experience. And it feels like beauty and hair and salons and all of the things that you offer through the platform are still very deeply human. Like you can't really go and get a haircut from ChatGPT quite yet, but at the same time, you could potentially use it to try and optimize some of the flows or some of the workflows and the management at the back end and stuff. So has AI really had a big impact on either what you're building or how you're building it, or do you feel that's still quite early in your journey at Treatwell?
I think we're quite early in general. I mean, we've seen already quite a big impact on how we build products. We've also, I think it's a pretty common use case, using AI for customer support. So that's been like the one of the first use cases on chatbots. We've also looked at some more out there things like voice AI so like if you call a salon and it's outside of their opening hours, being able to book through voice AI with our API in the background. Customers not telling us that they're quite ready for that yet. But it's something that we're curious about testing out. Also, kind of reaching out, doing some salon outreach, and trying to book some demos using AI agents through some of our marketing channels. So there's a few things we're trying out. Some are working, some not so well. We've also tried because obviously one of the appeal of booking on Treatwell for a lot of customers is that you've got that wisdom of the crowds, you've got a lot of reviews, you've got a lot of people that can help you, that have been to those salons, written reviews, share their experience, and can help you figure out if this is the right place for you. And so we've got a wealth of user-generated content. So we've looked at AI review summaries and things like that. So lots still to discover and test and learn from, and I think there's still a lot of fun things to do in that space. To just sort of on the customer side, I think there's still a lot to. One interesting thing is that there's a lot of anxiety around. I mean, not for you, Jason, when you go and get your haircut, you sound pretty relaxed about it. But a lot of people actually have some anxiety around the results that they're going to get. Is that going to match their expectations? Especially when you're thinking about facials or massage or things that are maybe more, not intrusive is not the right word. You know what I mean? So there is a need for people to understand that, like, to feel reassured that this is going to be a place where they get the right results. And so I think there is some things in that space that I think we can accelerate solving with AI, but we're early stage on that.
Plenty of opportunity to run ahead into, I guess. But that then sort of supposes then a question. Obviously, you've got a product team that you're responsible for that's helping to make some of those decisions, as well as all the other decisions that are being made and how the platform, both customer side and business side, how that's being developed. So how does product management look like at Treatwell at the moment? Like, how big's the team? How are they structured?
So I think the way we're set up is, I think, fairly classic. So size wise, we're about 120 product engineering, design, user research altogether. And the way we're organized is I think, fairly classic kind of three in a box with product engineering and design focused around customer problems, owning outcomes together. as well as owning a part of the tech domain. So you've got that. What we're always trying to balance out is like owning the tech stack, like your portion of the tech stack, but then also being primarily focused on a given customer problem that may span beyond your tech stack and being able to contribute outside of that domain. So I think that's not an unusual setup or an unusual challenge to get it right. But yeah.
So that then seems to suppose that maybe you're operating in what you might call kind of a classic book way. Like, you know, they've got all these books about empowered teams and the best ways to run product management teams and do product. Would you say that Treatwell is very much on the kind of Marty Kagan side of product, or is it somewhere kind of in the middle of that and a complete feature factory? Like, how do you kind of see product in a kind of idealized fashion at your company?
Well, I don't see it in an idealized fashion. I see it for what it is, I think. So we are not, I think we're somewhere in the middle, in a healthy place. When I joined Treatwell, which is nearly 2 years ago, I think I was quite maybe a little bit of a early shock in terms of what I expected and what I discovered in practice. I think it was. I think when you're familiar with some of those consumer brands and you're less familiar with the B2B side, it is a bit of a surprise to realize how much of a consumer brand can be sales led. So I think that's
Yep.
that's the thing that I had to get my head around early on. And so I think when you're sales led, it's a little bit hard. Well, when the company is sales led, and there's 700 employees at Treatwell, and tech and product is a small subset of that total employee base. So it gives you a little bit of a sense of like the type of company it is. And so it comes with its set of challenges, which means it's a little bit harder to be the perfect Marty Kagan type of empowered team world. But I think we're doing the best we can so far. So it's been a bit of a journey. There's a real appetite from the business when I joined to become more product led. I think there was a realization that sales led could only take us so far, and that the competition was moving much faster than we were, or starting to really catch up in some areas, and that we couldn't just keep hiring more and more and more people to fuel the growth. And so there was that appetite to embrace more product-led ways of working. So that was a nice introduction for me when I joined. But yeah, is it perfect every day? No, I think the main thing that I realized when I joined is like, you can't fight every battle. So picking battles, letting some things go, and being okay with the fact that sometimes you will, it's not going to be perfect every day, and there are some decisions that are going to be made that aren't, satisfying all of my product instincts, but sometimes it's okay and just live with it.
Kind of feels though like in that sort of situation, as you described when you came in, you've got this idea of like you've come into a brand that looks a certain way, you've realized that maybe the reality in the background is a little bit different. That is potentially something that could hit incoming product managers like ICs or more junior leaders that kind of come in, maybe expecting one thing and then ended up working on like the audit log functionality or something for the sales, and not quite necessarily feeling that the work that they're doing lives up to this kind of idealized version that they got in their head. And I know we talked about that a little bit earlier, but have you found any ways to try to kind of make those people feel that that they are working in a kind of an effective product culture with limits, obviously, as you discussed, and that they're not going to get everything that they want, but at least that they're not going to be kind of walking away feeling slightly shortchanged because things aren't like what they expected? Is that something that you put a lot of work into, or are there efforts that you put in place to try to sort of get people comfortable with how far they can go in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, the balance of investment within Treatwell is actually we've got twice the amount of um, product engineering teams on B2B than on B2C. And so when we hire new PMs or new designers, we're very, very transparent about like what domain they're going to start on. Like, not that it's necessarily going to be the forever team that, or the forever problem that you're focusing on solving, but we're very transparent about like the type of company you're joining and the type of culture that we're trying to bring and the people, like the talent that we want to, where we want to get to, like where we are today, where we want to get to, and like that there's still some ways to go. But the way we do product is the same across B2B, B2C, like SaaS and consumer. We have all of the same, you know, artifacts and expectations on the rigor around making data-driven decisions and understanding customer problems and doing product discovery. And because our, like the B2B domain, like the B2B space that we're in, we're talking about like very small businesses. We're talking about solo entrepreneurs, like multi-employee, multi-salon, but not the big chains. Like we're talking about like a very entrepreneur heavy type of industry. So it's still very close to doing product for consumer, even on the B2B side. So it is like the way we do product is the same everywhere, and the way we want to have that growth mindset across the teams and help each other deliver better products. Like we have all of those shared ceremonies to do that, and I think it's working quite well, if I say so myself.
Well, I don't know, you'd probably get in trouble if you didn't, but I think that thing around transparency and honesty is a really important piece, and it's something I spoke to Debbie from the FT about as well, this idea that I've certainly seen, and I've got friends at the moment that have kind of walked into new jobs where they were sold one thing and they walked into something that was just so totally different. And it's like, you could sit there and say, oh, well, that's a translation error. Like maybe, someone misspoke or they were just over optimistic. But you do have to sometimes wonder if people are being totally honest at all, or basically lying about the fact that an organization is working one way, or that it's a certain type of organization, or that we're quote unquote product led, when actually it's just so far from that you wonder like and you realize that they just want to get someone in. They just want to get someone good in that has expectations, and they know what those expectations are. So they kind of, pretend a little bit that those expectations are there. But I think your point about a journey as well is interesting. Like you don't have to have all of these things at once, but it's nice to think that there's maybe an expectation that you're going to have more of them one day rather than, like none of them today and also none of them in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
But do you have that kind of roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every hire that we make on the team, we also look for how can they help us get better at product, and like how can they as an individual bring some unique experience and perspective that will help us bring the business along on this journey with us as well. And so it's looking for people that want to be part of the solution, but are aware that there's some work to do, and like that it's also an opportunity to influence product culture, and it's not tiny business. So yeah, I think one of the things that I always tell my teams is, well, when I'm in a bad mood, the way I put it is I need less problems, more solutions. But what I mean by that is that, I understand the problem, but let's focus on how we can solve it together. And what have you tried so far? And how can I help you with this? And like always, like people that can be solutions oriented is the type of people that I think would thrive in an environment where it's not perfect, but we want to get better and we're realistic about where we are, and come along to help us get there faster.
Well, speaking about that kind of realism, and I guess also then to some extent connectedness to the day-to-day struggles of any product organization, like there's always something, right? I mean, part of the job. But you're also in a very senior position, so you don't get involved in all of the things, but you presumably have to get involved in some of the things. So how do you try to balance being that kind of executive strategic leader and kind of creating the culture and leading the team from up on high with the kind of the need to be that kind of visible person that's there day to day and that people can come to and people can approach?
Mm. So there's a few things we do. So we've got some of the recurring ceremonies where we encourage people to come and present their product discovery, present their findings and their learning plans, and that gives me an opportunity to like keep a keep a finger on the pulse um, on like what the teams are working on and how they're doing product day to day, and for everybody to um, give feedback, and for me to also observe how people are giving feedback, because I think the way I can scale myself as a leader is having people who are able to give the feedback I would give if I weren't in the room, and so who have that like giving feedback in a constructive way is a skill. And so me being able to coach the next set of leaders on how they give feedback and how they nurture that curiosity and that growth mindset is also really important, and one of the ways that I scale myself. And then we've got other kind of touch points where we do design critiques, where that also gives me a chance to um, sort of give a give the my like express my voice, like my product voice, I guess, and like how how I hope to see problems approached, and the type of questions I expect the product managers and the designers to ask themselves when they're kicking off a new project, or when they've gathered some new learnings. So, but I think that's kind of one way, and then the other way is a big part of my role is to make sure that everybody's equipped with the right context, so that I'm able to also pass down like, this is what's going on, at the board, at the exec level, or this is what we're seeing, you know, starting to think from a strategic, uh, business strategy perspective, or we've got a competitor that we're observing that's starting to do this. So this type of context is like being really thoughtful about consistently passing that to the team so that they're equipped with the right information to make the right decisions when I'm not there. So it's kind of being uh, trying to, I guess, backfill myself in all of those situations with making sure that there's people who understand the way, first have the right context, and b understand sort of the type of product we're trying to build and the type of product culture we're trying to build.
And do you ever feel that there's a risk that when you do go to these things and like you start maybe giving some of your feedback, or maybe giving some of that context about a new thing that could be important, like you say, like a competitor's doing a thing, or I've heard that this new AI widget is a good idea, or whatever, that people, do you feel that there's a risk that people kind of just say, oh, well, Maud said to do this now, so we've got to go and do that, and blow their roadmaps up? Or do you feel that they're able to kind of put some critical thinking in and actually realize that maybe you've just had an idea at the time, and that it's not automatically an instruction to go and do it?
Yeah, well, it's I was reminded very recently of being more thoughtful about how I provide feedback. Indeed, normally I'm pretty good at it, and I tend to not really. I try to approach it by asking questions like, uh, why do you think this is the biggest problem to solve? What data points or observations have you got to back this up? Or why did you think that was the best way to solve this type of problem? And so kind of going in with more open question and trying like empathy, and try to understand like, these are smart people that are very close to their customers, and I've gone much deeper into the data than I've got time for. So there's a good reason that they've come to that conclusion. So I want to understand that first before I give my uninformed feedback. So I'm usually pretty decent at that. But I think recently I took a bit of a shortcut, and that resulted in one of the teams Understanding my ask as we have to deliver this thing. And when what I meant to do is like, you have to solve this problem, you might consider this thing as a way to solve it. But I probably took a bit of a shortcut and skipped a few steps, and they took away Maud wants us to build this thing. Luckily, I coded early, or we coded early, and now the thing hasn't been built. The problem is getting better understood, and the team is validating whether that's a good way to solve the problem or not. But it is something that you've got to watch yourself all the time.
But do you think that watching yourself is something that is kind of a general kind of company value, like something that all of the leaders within the organization would do? Or do you think that, we all know, like, for example, working with sales teams, that it can be tough because, a sales team is going to be going out, they'll be speaking to a salon or a chain of salons, and they're going to come back, and there's just this one thing that needs to be done to, win that deal with all of those salons. And they may not necessarily want to go then and sit there and say, well, let's ask the 5 whys and who's it really for, and all of the questions that we would want to ask. So do you feel that that you have kind of come up with a way to balance those kinds of instincts from other parts of the organization and make sure, to your earlier point about being product led, that there is always a sort of a layer of product thinking across the organization, even if it's not from a product team?
So I think I've managed to influence some of our leaders in the business to think about to come to the product teams with problems rather than solutions. It's not, it's a consistent reminder that we have to express. But in practice, they've seen the value of doing that over time. And so it's just a quick reminder rather than a whole, when you come with with the solution, this is the downside of what you get. Like now it's just like, okay, but what is the problem you're trying to solve? And they understand what we're getting at straight away because we've been through this a few times and they've seen the value in practice. So I think we've made some progress with that. But it's also making sure that the PMs are trained to not take the solution, but ask for the problem, and they're pretty good at it.
Well, I mean, again, that's the kind of the dream, isn't it? Like that you have that not just the fact that product managers can kind of go to someone and push back, because anyone can push back and anyone can quote unquote just say no. But this idea that they can actually go back and also maybe show some evidence as well that this thing has other consequences versus just saying no and having no alternative, which I think is where these people in general, where product people can kind of fall apart. But that then...
So I don't think they don't tend to say no. They tend to say, okay, tell me more about what is what have they told you? Can we actually talk to them ourselves to understand a little bit better? Like, so that like we really value the customer direct input. So it's really helpful. But then also kind of unpacking a lot of that, like how often are you hearing this feedback? Is this more in this market or this market? And like what type of salons is that coming from? Is it more maybe the hairdressers, or is it coming more from the nails? Like trying to really unpack it, because it's a gold mine. All of the feedback that we get from the sales team that are spending all of their time talking to salons, they sit on all of that knowledge, and we want to, get as much of that knowledge transferred over as possible.
How do you think your approach to all of this stuff has changed, not even just within Treatwell, but over your career as you've kind of got more senior, moved away from day-to-day work and into more and more leadership roles, and become that now executive in the room? Like, how has your approach to product changed over that time?
I think maybe when I started in product, and I don't know if it's my approach to product or just my approach as a leader that has matured. But I think when I started out, I felt like I was expected to have all of the answers. And over time, I've realized I'm the one who has the least answers. And the more you grow into leadership, the less of the answers you have yourself, and the more you rely on people on your team to have the answers and to be comfortable with. I'm absolutely comfortable with that today. But to get comfortable with that maybe was maybe earlier in my career something to just relax about, like, and just be confident that it's okay not to have all of the answers. No one expects you to have all of the answers, actually, except yourself.
But I guess that could lead potentially to a bit of almost like imposter syndrome earlier on, because you're sitting there maybe before you came to that sort of enlightenment and you kind of end up where you are today, where you're like, am I really a leader? Because I should know this stuff and I don't know this stuff, and therefore maybe someone else knows this and they should be the leader instead. Did you ever feel that at any of the transition points in your career, or have you always had a fairly good trajectory, even if you didn't necessarily have all of the realizations at that point?
Oh no, I absolutely had imposter syndrome when I moved into product. So when so actually my first official product role or product title, I was a manager of product managers, and not having ever had the official product manager title myself, I realize now that I'd done product, but it wasn't necessarily called product. And, anyway, but massive imposter syndrome at the time. And I think that created a lot of that anxiety inside me of like, I should know this. I mean, why do I know all of this? So yeah, no, absolutely. But I, got some pretty good managers along the way who helped me figure that out, and who coached me into being successful through others, I guess, is the biggest realization in that transition phase, that success doesn't mean something you've done yourself, and it can actually be something, it's even better actually if it's something that your team's delivered with your support, obviously. But I was telling someone yesterday that the biggest buzz I get from work is actually seeing someone I've coached on something actually put it in practice and become successful at it. So that's the gratification, or the best gratification I get from my job today.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. This idea that maybe that's actually when you become a leader more than anything else, is the point where you start to realize that if you can sort of nudge someone in the right direction, or maybe it's a big nudge depending on how far away they are, but like if you can nudge someone in the right direction and you see that start to pay off, then you start to feel again I think you said earlier, kind of like making it so you don't have to be in the room all the time, because you know that people are going to do some of the things that you would have done anyway. So it's definitely an interesting kind of journey. And as someone myself that was always a very strong individual contributor, and as a developer as well, I always judged myself on my own work and the stuff that I did with my fingers. And it did take a little while to start to realize that sometimes just helping other people do their best work is a thing, right?
That's the job.
That's the job. Right, I'm going to do a quick lightning round of other little questions. I tried to get some from your team, but I think they're all terrified of you, so no one's submitting anything. So I'm just going to have to come up with a few just random questions, get some quick answers to kind of get the pulse. What makes you you? What's the best piece of career advice that you've ever received?
Constantly looking at backfilling yourself. I think it's the best advice I've ever got. It's thinking about building your bench, growing the people under you to become the best leaders they can be, forging a path for them, making them more independent, independently successful. Because not only does that allow you to then, carve out some headspace, like you don't have to be in the weeds as much. And so you've got a little bit more time to think about the next thing for you, or the more time for your strategic thinking rather than being in the day-to-day and the delivery. And so that creates the next opportunity for you. So I think this idea of not being afraid of having amazing people, like people that are better than you on your team, is what I thrive for.
Absolutely. It's definitely something that's easy for me to achieve. All right, next question. First app you check in the morning.
Wordle.
Wordle. Oh, what's your streak?
Let me check.
This is the important question, the most important question of the entire interview.
I know. And I want to get the facts. So I got it in 4 this morning.
Yeah.
And my streak is max streak 216, current streak 64.
Oh, I dread to think what the word is that you didn't get, but you don't have to tell me. Most important trait in a product manager?
Curiosity.
Kills the cats. If you could have dinner with any famous person, alive or dead, who would it be and why?
So I think it would be an author called Robin Hobb. She wrote this series of books that I found amazing about its fantasy. And those are the books that really got me into like dragon books and stuff like that. And like the universe that she created, I was so immersed in it for so long, actually, because there were so many books in that series that that I think it would be an amazing conversation to see like what other stories has she got in her head that she hasn't put on paper.
Any lessons from her writings that are applicable to product managers, though?
I mean, I'm sure she would be an amazing inspiration to think outside the box.
Absolutely. Well, boxes need to be blown up with dragons or whatever. And if you had to start your career all over again, what would you do differently this time?
I think going back to what I was talking about earlier, like put less pressure on myself to know everything and to be the smartest person in the room and actually enjoy not being the smartest person in the room. I really do enjoy that now, but I think when I was younger, earlier on in my career, I wasn't I didn't have that piece of advice. So,
but there's a certain level of psychological safety, which I guess does exist at Treatwell because you're working there and you're saying these things while you work there. But it feels like in some companies, and certainly some companies that I can think of from the past that maybe I've worked at, and certainly some of the people that I've coached that I speak to them and some of the situations that they find themselves in their companies, where almost, whilst I agree with you that like not being the smartest person in the room is a positive trait, that in some companies it's not a positive trait. I guess the question there is there a way to make it into a positive trait, or are there some companies where you just have to, pretend and move on when you can?
I think even in those companies, like the reality is that you're there because you're bringing something unique to the table and you are the smartest about some of the topics that they care about. So it's maybe you're not the smartest about everything all the time, but you're like being aware of what you're smart about, but also what you can learn. Because I think one of the things that I always look for in my roles is what am I going to learn? How am I going to grow? And where is it like, what trajectory is it setting me on? And so I think if but obviously you need the people to hire you. So you need to be bringing some smarts to the table. So I don't go into all of my interviews saying I'm the dumbest person in the room. So I'm pretty aware of what I bring to the table, but I also want to be learning from people around me. And so it's having that balance.
I guess it's about identifying the areas that you should be legitimately smart in and being tactically smart when you need to be, but not being a smart ass about everything, I guess. But, that's easier said than done for some people. Final question. Why should product people work for Treatwell?
Because we've got some really fun challenges to solve, like really meaty opportunities that haven't been solved yet. Like you've got all of the challenges that come with two-sided marketplaces, but we've also got this amazing industry that we serve on the salons. It's also an industry that's primarily, like I think it is in the UK at least, the sector that has the highest rate of female entrepreneurship. And we've got a strong partnership with those salons, and helping them strive is something that I believe is really exciting to do. It helps also fuel the economy, which isn't a terrible thing to do. And in terms of the product team that we're building, we're across 13 markets. We don't have product managers in all 13 markets, but we have people between the UK, Italy, Netherlands, Spain. And so you get to work with lots of international people that brings a diversity of perspective and who are quite fun to hang out with too.
Well, that's always an important consideration in any job as well, obviously. Where could people come and find out more about Treatwell? Maybe look at your jobs page or maybe even connect with you?
I think LinkedIn would be a good place to start. I'm not on TikTok or.
Oh, come on. There's got to be some sort of Maud's tips or something coming up on TikTok at some point.
Oh, that's my cue to start it.
Yeah, watch this space. Well, I'll make sure to link all of that into the show notes. And yeah, hopefully you'll continue to make great progress in the battle against all of your competitors and make sure that as many people get as many good treatments and haircuts and all of the other things as possible. Maybe even me one day if I can work out how to use the app. But all I can do for now, Maud, is thank you very much for coming on and I wish you a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.